It's Friday, the 8th of May, 2020, day 57 of the new normal at Santa Monica College.
This is the Pandemic Podcast, your twice-a-week news and culture guide to surviving and thriving in the age of coronavirus. I'm Glenn ZUCMAN.
And I'm Jackie SEDLEY. Today on the podcast, it's PIO Day, or Public Information Officer Day. We're joined by Constance Farrell, the Public Information Officer for the City of Santa Monica, and Grace Singh Smith, the Public Information Officer for Santa Monica College. Constance and Grace, welcome to the Pandemic Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Constance,
so
Constance, to start with you, we are eager to hear about what's happening in the City of Santa Monica and at Santa Monica College. But before we go into that, can you say a few words about how the pandemic and isolation has affected you personally? Are you going into the office? Are you working from home? Are you feeling productive? Are you frustrated? How are things going?
It's a great question. I'm doing pretty well. I think that taking things day by day. Sometimes I lose track of what day it is. I lose track of what time of day it is because the work world and the personal world all just really blend together when you're doing everything at home. I have a 1.5-year-old at home and my husband Dylan, and so we're just everything is happening all at once, all the time. I'm working most of the time, so Dylan has really taken on the lion's share of keeping Dash super entertained and busy. But it's a little bit of a madhouse. But
are you working more hours than you were before?
Yes, absolutely. So
you're from home, but it's just full court press.
I'm working from home, but it is all the time. Really wanting to get information out to our community in a timely fashion really requires just constant awareness about what's happening at the county level, at the state level, and making sure people have information. So it really is a constant role that I'm playing with our broader emergency operations center for the city. But personally, yeah, I'm doing as good as I hope to be doing. Feel very lucky to have my health. We have a backyard that we've been growing vegetables in, and that's really taken off with all the rain. And so that's been really fun to just kind of, do some work out there and enjoy.
What are you growing in the backyard?
Right now, we have a ton of kale. We have more oregano than anyone knows what to do with. There's a limited amount of things you can really do with oregano.
I've got a grapefruit tree that is just overloaded with grapefruit. So I have I mix it with San Pellegrino and have grapefruit spritzer every day.
That sounds lovely.
And Grace, how are you dealing with the pandemic? How's your life changed?
I have to say with Constance, not to repeat, but ditto, the whole work-life balance has been thrown completely off kilter. I think, when you work in an office, when you actually have to go in, there's that physical sense of separation, right? When you leave at whatever, 5, 6, 7. The first few weeks was excruciatingly busy, I should say. There's just so much going on, so much to keep on top of. Personally speaking, I'll just share this little anecdote. Well, not anecdote, but I'd been so busy at SMC for, I think it was 2 weeks running. And I'm from India, a very rural part of Northeast India. And I had actually not thought about my parents at all. And by the time I was able to catch a breath here, and I called them, they were on lockdown. And the situation there, obviously in terms of cases, they don't have a lot as much as the US, but, infrastructure and everything else. So that hit me really hard. And I really had to come to terms with it. And I actually wrote about it in an essay that's published. So just to recap, I have been thinking a lot about just equity. It's something we talk a lot about at the college. But during this time, that sense of privilege, of just having a lot when so much of the world doesn't have. In my case, it was my parents, My dad would ask me, do you have plenty of food? Do you have plenty of food? And I started to get a little annoyed, I was like, yes, Dad, I told you we have plenty of food, we still go to the grocery store. I just have to wear a mask, et cetera, et cetera. So one day he says, I can't go to the bazaar anymore because it's closed. So they're basically living off the land. Lucky in the sense that they're in a village, right? Instead of in the city where you're dependent on a supply, external supply. But in that sense, the pandemic has hit me really hard. I try to take care of myself by spending time with my dog. Samson is my assistant. My husband is wonderful, but my husband also works essentially a service job. It's been rough, and I'm lucky to live in Santa Monica, rent control. And as I take a walk in these neighborhoods, I see these huge, beautiful houses, right? And then you're like, oh, my place is small. But then you realize that now with things being closed, there's so many people who don't even have that access to walk in a beautiful neighborhood with birds and trees, the things that I'm enjoying. So that has hit me kind of hard, and especially knowing SMC students and things that they have to struggle with. But in short, I'm grateful, and I feel the sense of the weight of my privilege quite heavily during this time.
In terms of the way in which you've been able to balance work and those personal pressures, have you felt a sense of pressure from both of your workplaces to kind of maintain the consistency, or has there been leeway to understand that you're both also experiencing this in the same way that the people that are relying on the information you give are?
I mean, I would say that we've been really fortunate to really expand our communications team almost instantaneously once we declared our local emergency. We have about 24 people who are a part of our joint information center. And so essentially what we did is we pulled team members from across the organization and asked them to fill a communications role. And so everything from writing email content to writing social media content, doing social media listening and responding. We have a hotline where people can call in 7 days a week from 8 to 8. So we have really expanded what we're able to do, which has really been beneficial in so many ways, and I think has really led to the success of us really getting critical information out to the community in a timely way and to specific audiences, including seniors. But for me, a big part of my role is to be a spokesperson for the city and to be that first point of contact with the media, and to make sure our media partners have what they need to communicate with, Santa Monicans in the region. And so I'm always available. I want to make sure they have what they need. And so, yes, there's definitely understanding, but really everyone at the city who's a part of the Emergency Operations Center is working 7 days a week and is always there to respond. So it's not, I'm definitely not the only one who's like, what day is it? Wait, what time of day is it? Is it appropriate to be on a phone call at 9 p.m. with, we're all kind of in that space together.
Yeah, I've always really respected the work that both of you do for your organizations, because you really are that first point of contact. Grace, I've worked with you more personally than Constance, but even a couple of months ago, we got lunch and we sat down before all of this, and you had so many thoughts and so many stories about the school, and obviously I'm sure a lot of those things are kind of on hold, but I can only imagine how many miles a minute your brain must be running now if it was running that fast before all of this.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride, is how I could say it. In terms of public information, I'm a one-person team, but similar with Constance, we have this emergency management, emergency operations team that was pulled together in the early days of the crisis. And SMC does have a really amazing social media team, with I think something like 10 student interns who really inform that voice. Our student communications through enrollment development, our chief, the police chief, Johnny Adams, he's very media savvy, so he's just a great sounding board and support. So although in terms of PR, I might be a one-person team, there is a wealth of knowledge and resources that I'm able to tap into. And to go back to Glenn's question, I think to a certain point, and Constance, I hope you don't mind me sort of speaking on both of our behalves, but I think the onus of creating that work-life balance is on us, because everybody has so much going on. They're not going to be like, hey, do you need a break right now, And I feel like if I step up and say I need a break, or I need to tune out for this, for a specific amount of time this weekend, that folks would respect that. So I definitely feel that kind of support. But I do feel that the onus of creating the work-life balance lies with each of us personally.
I totally agree. And that is something I'm always working on, because I have such an eagerness to make sure people have what they need, but I do need to also make sure I have what I need. And so I'm always kind of, ebbing and flowing between those two things.
Yeah.
As I'm sure, every good PIO does, our type A personalities, right?
Constance and I, we were literally cut from the same cloth, because every time we've had coffee, we'll talk about things, and literally she gets the words out of my mouth before they're out. So obviously this job attracts a certain type of person and the two of us are that. So.
Exactly.
Constance, do you have a sense of what the remainder of 2020 looks like for the city of Santa Monica?
Wow, that's a really great question, Glenn. The big thing that I'm kind of sitting with this week and thinking about a lot, both in terms of my professional life and my personal life, thinking about my friends, family, my colleagues, Santa Monica residents, is we all hear and know this idea of this dimmer switch that we all have to get comfortable with, that this pandemic isn't just going to be over and we're just going to turn the lights on and business activity is going to resume, our social lives are going to resume, our civic life is going to go back to normal. That is just not going to happen. And so, getting comfortable with the idea of physical distancing, for the foreseeable future, getting really comfortable with that face covering that you're wearing out in public and when you go on essential trips. We're going to have new formats for businesses. We're seeing that this week, LA County is saying yes to phase 1 of reopening, with, some businesses being able to operate through a curbside pickup format. And so that is, life as we know it is not going to just go back to what it was before. And so it's really having to reassess, how do we responsibly live in this new time with long-term public health measures in place.
So the density of the Santa Monica Pier, the 3rd Street Promenade, those experiences are out there a ways, for sure.
They are out there a ways, and how you engage with businesses. We're all very eager to see businesses come back. We want to patronize our favorite local businesses, and we want them to come back. In the city, we're, working aggressively to be able to roll out more flexible operations for businesses to come back and do in different ways, especially in this, in this COVID environment. And so really getting, used to, oh, I really love that restaurant, I really want to eat there. Well, guess what? It might just have to be takeaway for now. We're a little ways away from that dine-in experience that we all love, right? There's a certain environment, change scenery, just enjoying a meal with friends. All of that is gonna take some time, and we all have to get comfortable sort of in this new normal.
And Grace, with the sort of the parallel question for SMC, I guess we know that fall, so the remainder really of 2020 is pretty much going to be online. I was kind of wondering, will that also be maybe gradual, where maybe smaller classes that need facilities will eventually come back, and kind of larger lecture classes will stay online for a while?
So what is on the table right now, what's being planned and thought out and still in discussions, are that some smaller classes, that can't easily have instruction delivered in an online environment might be provided in a hybrid format, but we don't have any details to be shared yet. In terms of planning what the future will look like, the emergency operations team right now, they're developing contingency plans, and SMC is a really large, complex organization. So obviously there are so many factors to take into consideration. But what they're trying to figure out is, how can we transition back things to an on-ground environment in a way that's safe. And obviously those things are constantly changing. But what we do have guiding us are the 6 critical indicators that Governor Newsom put out. And that's what informed the decision about fall, because part of his indicators were the fact that, we would have had to be able to, safely isolate, test, trace individuals, and obviously SMC's open access. So I guess that's a very long answer to the question. The short answer would be the college is working on hopefully transitioning things back. What will that new normal look like in fall for these hybrid courses, or even in the spring? We don't know. We just don't know yet. But based on the information that we have right now, we are developing plans to transition back to seeing each other in person in a way that's safe.
I have a feeling that for both of you, the people that are probably craving a lot of information have concerns about the economy and about whether it's their job or their educational opportunities, the way that those both intertwine, because one costs and one is where you get the money from. How have you kind of been seeing that scope, whether that is with Santa Monica College and their forms of payments in the form of the CARES Act that just came out, or in the form of student enrollment potentially dropping because people may not be able to afford those classes, or on the flip side with the city of Santa Monica and a lot of people worried about their jobs coming back? How have you kind of been able to speak to those separate qualms from people?
We are, actively working on economic recovery right now. We have an economic recovery task force that just got off the ground that's really going to involve, people, organizations from across Santa Monica that are really going to work hand in hand to really kick up our economy. And that is a focus of the city. We actually are, like cities across the state, like institutions across the state and across the country, are facing a pretty dramatic budget deficit as a result of the coronavirus. Obviously, Santa Monica is a place that we really are reliant on our visitors and on that tourism for our hotel stays, for our shopping and dining. And so we're facing a $224 million budget gap through 2022. And so actually on Tuesday, our city council approved a plan that restructures our city government to really align around 3 main objectives. And one is a clean and safe Santa Monica. Another is emergency response, of course. And then the third is robust economic recovery for all. And that's businesses, that's families, that's individuals. So, what can we do as a city, pulling on all the strengths of Santa Monica, bring people together to really get our economy going again, to support small and local businesses. And throughout, we've had a lens, a focus on that throughout the emergency. We were one of the first cities, if not the first city in the state, to put an eviction moratorium in place that basically allowed people who were impacted by COVID-19 to stay in their housing without getting evicted, both for residential tenants and commercial tenants. And that's, really critical. People are vulnerable right now. People don't have the income they had, either a loss of income or, partial or total loss of income. And so we're really focused on what can we do to really protect the most vulnerable people in Santa Monica. And so the restructuring is really going to allow us to focus in those 3 areas.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys attended the Tuesday night board meeting, but there was a presentation made by the Vice President of Business and Administration. And here's what we know right now. What we know right now is, I'm just going to try to speak about everything in very general layman's terms. The deficit, it looks like it's almost certainly going to go up, right? So we're going to have less money. The major impact on the college's budget in terms of COVID-19, I'm just going to speak in terms of COVID-19, is non-resident student enrollment, which includes international students. And this is obviously not just an SMC problem. Colleges and universities across the nation are facing this. We're projecting a fairly steep decline, just like in higher education institutions everywhere. This morning, the governor, I don't know if you saw the news, released a memo. The Department of Finance and the news is really dire. It's far more dire than we expected. I think it's something to the tune of, what was it, Constance? Was it like a $54 billion? $54 billion. And so unlike the city of Santa Monica, the college depends chiefly on the state for funding. And so we actually don't know. It's too early to tell what precisely the effect will be on the college's budget. But of course, it is certain that it will impact the college's budget. So where the college is right now is that in June, the Board of Trustees will see a tentative budget for the coming fiscal year. And that budget is being reviewed by a subcommittee called the DPAC Budget Subcommittee, which includes representatives from all constituent groups of the college, including faculty, classified employees. However, the state, that will be based on the best information we have. However, the state also had to extend the income tax filing deadline from April 15th to July 15th, I believe. So what that means is that a lot of financial analysts expect that the state will end up revising their budget, in late summer, early fall. If the state revises the budget, ergo, the logic leads to SMC will likely also have changes to the budget. Again, a very long answer, very roundabout way. The short way to sum it up is it's too early to tell. Will the COVID-19 economic fallout have an effect on the college's budget? Absolutely.
And one thing about Santa Monica that's important to know is, we're a community of approximately 93,000 residents, which means we fall below that 500,000 threshold, which through the CARES Act, cities that have a population under 500,000 do not receive direct funding from the federal government. And so we don't yet know if the governor, his May budget revise will include funding for cities directly, those smaller cities, which is Santa Monica. And so we are eagerly awaiting that information. We're hoping it's going to come.
Right.
We don't know when it will come. We certainly know it won't be enough to meet the deficits that we're experiencing. But of course, we're advocating for that actively right now.
Right, and I should add, for the benefit of SMC students, that SMC is receiving roughly $12 million through the CARES Act, and these acronyms: Higher Education, I forget what the other E is, Relief Fund is HIRF. So ironically enough, so the $12 million through the CARES Act, 50% will go directly to students for those who are adversely affected by COVID-19, and 50% can only be used specifically to help the college recover the costs related to having to shift classes and services online. So those things come with a very specific rule book, essentially. And the college was one of the first to file for the CARES funding. Like, as soon as we heard, apparently our folks are on it. But what we're hearing is that institutions who are later to apply have actually gotten their funding, and the college is still waiting to hear. So we know we're getting the money. We don't have the money yet. But in the meantime, we've developed a rubric so that we can identify what amounts should be given to students whose needs are identified based on the rules that are provided along with the funding.
The pandemic has been obviously horrific in terms of health, in terms of the economy, and yet a number of the people that we've talked to on this program have talked about their personal experience of having this sort of time-out-like experience, give them a chance to rethink life, priorities, goals. Have either of you had a kind of a reconsideration of where you are and where you're headed with existence on Earth?
Constance, you want to go first?
No, you take it. Great, you take that one.
I think
I'm very
we've
eager
all
to
been
hear what
asking
you have to say.
Okay, so this is really silly, but I think this is my first video Zoom. I'm very uncomfortable on video, believe it or not. And
Well, sorry for putting you on the spot, but you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Agree.
So I think I can literally count on the fingers of one hand the amount of times I have Skyped and FaceTimed my parents. The technology exists. I refuse to do so because of some weird philosophical thing that I can't explain in 10 seconds. But the fallout, just realizing where they are, realizing that I can't even get to them. They're elderly. My dad is turning 80 this year. So guess what? I am on WhatsApp and I am FaceTiming them 3 times a week. And so in terms of existence, I'm a fiction writer. I don't want to say on the side. I don't have a lot of time to do it. But to me, the arts and literature are even more important to me now than they were. Chekhov writes, right? Art is absolute. The aim of literature is absolute and honest truth. And I think that during this time, artists, writers, no pressure, obviously, because we're all sorting out our feelings and our way of existence right now. But I do feel certainly literature has been an anchor for me. I try to read at least one page of something every night. So it's only affirmed my belief in literature as well.
I think for me, it's been really nice I'm always constantly moving. I mean, I'm doing so much at work, but I'm also just a person who's always on the move. I'm always just in constant movement. And it's been really significant for me to just sit back, stay in one place for a significant amount of time. I mean, I still haven't driven since March 11th, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't.
So
Wow.
that's, I commute, a significant amount of time. And so to have a reset in that regard has been really good. Just for my health, my perspective, I think just like sitting in my backyard, watching my son, watching my husband garden, even if I'm working, just to have that sense of calm and that sense of peace and that sense of I don't have to be going and moving all the time. Yeah. It is really good for the soul to just be still.
Yeah.
And to be reflective and to appreciate. I need more. I'm going to need some time, I think, to recover from this period, because I do feel a little bit, I have that gratitude, I have that perspective, but I do still need some, I don't know. I think I'm going to need to recover from this. I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know what that mental reset, I need more space to really come back to my work and bring everything I have to it and bring everything I have to my personal life. Cause for me, this is actually, it's been very traumatic. This whole, this crisis has been truly, a traumatic experience. And so I don't quite know yet, but I know more work needs to be done in that regard as we come out of this, as we resume some of our, normal life, as some of us come back to work in staggered shifts. I'm going to need to figure that part out. I did get a puzzle and I'm very excited about that. I also I've also, consumerism, I'm not consuming as much of anything. But my mom sent me some Crocs yesterday. And if you would have asked me, I would have said Crocs were the biggest fashion faux pas in the history of fashion, right? But I mean, how can you not love these? They're orange and they have yellow bananas on them.
They have bananas on them. Wow.
They have bananas on them. And I'm absolutely obsessed with them. I think it's because my mom sent my son some, and they're very practical. You can just hose them down, but I don't know. I'm appreciating the small things and appreciating being very comfortable.
Right. I think as the cliche saying goes, even though it's very repetitive, you're obviously not alone in those feelings. And I think that especially for two people who are always working and running and being so attentive, this is a very abrupt stop. And I know that everyone has kind of been going around saying that this is the time we all need because the world keeps moving all the time. just because the world has stopped doesn't mean everything up here has stopped, and it most certainly doesn't mean that the work you two do has stopped. So I really appreciate both of your honesty and taking the time to be here, and I hope that you're both able to find that balance, because nobody deserves that more than people who are still maintaining their composure like you two seem to be in the midst of all of this chaos.
Seem, operative word.
I use that for everybody. I don't want anyone to think I'm assuming they're doing great. You guys just both look like you're wearing clothes and that you seem well rested, and that's all that you might not be wearing pants. I can't see the bottom of the screen. Who cares? Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Constance Farrell, Public Information Officer for the City of Santa Monica, California, and Grace Singh Smith, Public Information Officer for Santa Monica College. Thanks for visiting the Pandemic Podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. You're doing great work. Thank you. Bye, Constance.
Bye. So good to see you, Grace. So good to see you. Thank
Stay
you, Len and
well
Jackie.
and continue to express your humanity.
And tune in every Wednesday and Friday for new episodes of the Pandemic Podcast.